How to sew the gift basket from the Wrapped in Style kit collection from Amber Makes. Start by cutting out the fabric. Cut out the gift basket outer pieces from the panel and pin the labels to them so that you remember which piece is which. Now, using your own lining fabric, place the outer pieces right sides up on top and cut all the way round so that you make a front, back, base and two side lining pieces. Making the gift basket outer. If you want to add a little structure to your gift basket, then use wadding or foam for a padded finish. Sew each of the outer pieces to the foam and then you can quilt some of the details on the bag if you want. Put the foam on the front outer, the back outer, the side gusset pieces and the base gusset pieces in the same way. Now take the base gusset outer and one of the side gusset pieces and pin them together along the short edge. Now mark 1/4 inch from the top of the side gusset piece. You'll be marking this on the wrong side because they're right sides facing, and then mark 1/4 inch on the bottom. Sew together between those two marks. That means that you're leaving 1/4 inch unstitched. Repeat this to sew the other side gusset outer to the other side of the base gusset outer. Now press these seams open. So you've got the side gusset, the base gusset and then the side gusset. This makes one long gusset strip. Take the front outer and place one side of the side gusset outer right sides facing down the right hand side of the front outer. Pin it together at the top and at the bottom. Make sure those seams stay open and then pop a pin, another couple of pins through. Now you need to sew together all the way down to the top, stopping at that bottom seam. So place it under your machine and using the usual 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew together from the top all the way down to the bottom, removing the pins as you go. Hold that seam allowance open and flat and then sew slowly and leave the needle so it's in the seam. Leave the needle down, raise the foot. Now turn it around so that the base gusset is right sides facing with the bottom edge of the front outer. And pin it into place. The raw edges need to stay matching up, so it's worth putting a few pins in place before you stitch again. Lower the presser foot and start stitching again so that you're stitching all the way down the side edge. Repeat that in the other corner to attach the front outer to the gussets. Now take the back outer and place the other raw edge of the side gusset on top. Always stitch with the side gusset on top because then you can see where those seams are going to be sewn open so that you know where to pivot at the corners. And the reason you left that 1/4 inch unstitched at the bottom is it's easier to get it to turn around the edges to pivot. Keep all the raw edges matching as you do it. Now stitch together down the side, pivot, stitch it together along the bottom, pivot your needle at the other corner and stitch all the way around to the top. That's your outer finished. It looks like a little case now. Repeat this to sew the lining pieces together in exactly the same way. The only difference is in the centre of one of the bottom seams, leave a 4-inch gap unstitched. This will be your turning gap that you'll use later for turning it right sides out. Making the handles. Take one gift basket handle and fold it in half lengthways with right sides facing so that you match those raw long edges. If you press it in half at this stage, it's easier to sew it together because you'll keep the centre crease at the bottom, will keep the raw edges matching a little bit easier. Once you've pressed it, pin it together so that again the raw edges are matching all the way along, so that you're going to make a tube. Pin it together all the way along and sew down the length. Once this is sewn, press the seam open. I stitched it together across the short end using a long stitch because I'm going to remove these later. Now you need to turn the handle right sides out. The easiest way to do this is to use a turning tube. Put the tube inside until you reach that short end that you've tacked across. Take the stick and with the blunt end push the tube all the way through the tube so the handle goes through the tube, and then pull it out. Now take the stick out of the handle. You can now undo the stitches from the short end. Fold it. Just roll the seam between your fingers so the seam is lying right on the edge. And press all the way along, making sure the seam lies on the edge. Now top stitch down the long edges so that your handle looks like this. Then repeat that to make the other gift basket handle in exactly the same way. Assembling the gift basket. Take the outer and on the left hand side measure 2 inches in from the side seam and mark this point with a pin. Now on the other side of the bag, measure 2 inches in from the side seam and mark this point with a pin. Now take one of the handles and measure 1/2 inch from the top short raw edge and pop a pin in this place. Now take the other short end of the handle and in exactly the same way measure 1/2 inch down from the top raw edge and put a pin in this place. Now pin the end of the handle so that the 1/2 inch sticks up beyond the top of the bag where you've put the pin and the outer left edge matches up with that 2 inch pin mark. Now holding the handle straight, pin it in a little bit further down. This is to stop the handle getting twisted as you stitch it later. Now making sure the handle lies straight and isn't twisted, pin it into place, matching up the right edge with that 2 inch pin and making sure it sticks up to 1/2 inch above the top of the bag. And again, pop another pin in, making sure the handle's straight a little bit further below. Now tack it into place across the top edges of both ends and further down where you've pinned. This will hold it straight during assembly. Pin and stitch the other handle to the back of the bag in exactly the same way. Now take your assembled lining and place the bag outer inside the bag lining so that they are right sides facing. You're now going to pin the two together across the top edge. To make sure that they're both in the same place and all the seams match, take one of the side gusset seams and pin them together. If you open out the seam allowance of both the lining and the outer at this stage, you'll have a neater, flatter finish to your bag when it's finished. Pin the other side seam into place, making sure they match up. Then turn it around and match up the side seams on the other side. Again, make sure those seams match up exactly. Open out the seam allowances so that they're flat and pin into place. Then pin the final side seam into place. You now need to pin the raw edges of the top of the lining and the outer together. You'll see that the handles are sticking out by ½ an inch above. This makes the handles extra secure. If you place the handles right on the edge without the extra sticking out, they're not so secure and they can easily get pulled out when you're carrying your bag later. So pin it together, making sure those raw edges match. Pin it together all the way around in exactly the same way. Make sure the handles are tucked to the inside so that you don't accidentally get any caught in your stitching. Now sew it together all the way around the top edge. Once that's done, pull the lining out from inside the outer and put your hand in that turning gap you left in the bottom of the lining earlier. Grab hold of one of the bottom corners of the outer and pull the outer out through the lining, through the turning gap, easing it out gradually. Until the whole bag and the outer and the lining are turned right sides out. Push your hand back inside to open out the corners. If you push out the corners at this stage before you close the turning gap, it's a little bit easier. Push out the corners of the lining so that the base is lying flat. Now fold the edges of the turning gap under by ½ an inch and pin them together. Now top stitch this turning gap closed. Once it's done, you can undo those tacking stitches that you put in a bit lower down to keep the handle straight earlier. Just use a seam ripper, because if you use the longest stitch on your machine, a number 5 is good, then they're easy to pull out. They're only temporary to keep the handle straight while you are stitching the top edges together. So remove those now. So once all the threads are removed, push the lining inside the outer and roll the seam round so that it's sitting right at the top. The aim here is that the lining can't be seen from the outside. You need to arrange it a little bit and give it a good press and it will keep it along the edge. Now top stitch all the way around the top edge. Once that's done, you've got a nice neat finish. The lining will stay to the inside. Now your bag is finished and ready to gift.